Hi, I'm Kristina, and I'm the trip leader on the Inverted Atlas Invaders, Traders, and Pyramid Builders archaeology trip to Egypt. And today we're going to be taking a virtual tour through some of Egypt's most spectacular hidden wonders like you would actually find on an Inverted Atlas trip. The first stop on today's virtual tour is the site of Abydos, which is located in Middle Egypt just above Luxor. So there's lots to see at Abydos, but the main thing is the temple of Seti I, which is the site that we're looking at now. So this temple was built by Pharaoh Seti in the 19th dynasty. It's an irregularly shaped temple, so most Egyptian temples are built in a shape where the temple kind of condenses towards the end, but this one doesn't do that. This one's in an L shape. And the most important thing about this temple is that it contains the list of Egyptian kings all the way down to Narmer, who was the founder of a united Egypt, all the way down to Seti and then his son Ramses II, who actually completed the temple. So the interior of this temple is actually really quite special. Here you can see we're taking a walk through the Temple of Seti. Something interesting to note about the interior of this temple is that you can tell the parts that were completed by Seti because the relief is carved in raised relief and by his son's sunken relief. These figures are a really good example of the figures that were carved during the reign of Seti. This is called bas relief, the art of chiseling around the figure rather than into the rock. So this takes a lot more time. So Seti was rather famous for his quality, whereas Ramses was more famous for being prolific and his quantity. Another amazing thing about this temple is it still retains a lot of color in places. So when you go in most Egyptian temples, you notice that there is no color. That is because the temple has often been exposed to the elements, but this one hasn't. So you can see the exact colors the ancient Egyptians would have used. This is a really strange site at the site of Abydos, and it's one of my personal favorites. So this is the Assyrian. The temple is roughly contemporary with the Seti temple, only it was built underground. And the reason for that is Abydos is actually the cult center for the god Osiris, who is the god of the dead. So it's been hypothesized that this temple was built underground to be closer to Osiris, who was in the underworld. The other reason that's been put forward is this was a cenotaph or a ceremonial tomb of the god. So the tomb of Osiris at his cult center. Now, the reason that Abydos was Osiris's cult center is this is where Osiris's head landed. So if you know the myth of Horus and Seth, you'll know exactly why this site is so sacred to this particular Egyptian god. This brings me to a story. At the beginning of time, according to Egyptian myth, there was one supreme god, Atum, who rose from the waters of chaos on a primordial mound. Now, Atum gave birth to Nut, the sky, and Geb, the earth, and then came Shu, the air, who held Geb and Nut apart. Now, these gods gave birth to four others: Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. Osiris was given the kingship of the land, and he married his witch wife Isis. Seth was given control of the desert, and he married his sister Nephthys. Seth became angry with his lot, banished basically into the Egyptian desert, and plotted against his brother. Seth came into town and offered Osiris a fantastic chest, and he said in order for Osiris to take the chest of his own, all he had to do was get in the chest. Once Osiris was in the chest, Seth slammed the lid shut and threw the chest into the Nile. Osiris drowned. So for good measure, Seth fished out the box and cut Osiris into many pieces, scattering them all over Egypt. Now, Osiris's head, as we've said, landed at Abydos, which is why Abydos is the cult center for Osiris. His wife Isis was obviously devastated, so being the goddess of magic, she went around and collected up all the pieces of Osiris and put him back together, and she was able to resurrect him just long enough to conceive a child, who she hid from Seth until he came of age, and was able to challenge his evil uncle for the throne of Egypt. And this god was Horus. So Horus and Seth battled it out, and Horus claimed the throne of Egypt for his own. So at that point, Horus became the god of Egyptian kingship, Osiris became the god of the dead, which is why our Osirian is very close to Osiris, which is who it was intended for. The next stop on our tour today is Luxor, and now you may be thinking, wait a minute, Luxor is always on the itinerary. Even the most standard companies include Luxor. But they only include the standard sites at Luxor. They don't include things like what we're looking at here, which is the Ramesseum, the mortuary temple of Ramses the Great. It's always left off, and I have no idea why. This temple is iconic, so I really don't know why it gets left out so much. And it's one of those places, you'd know it if you saw it. It's been in lots of different books. It's had a poem written about it by Shelley. And in all the little oldie worldy pictures of Egypt that you see in hotel rooms, it's always the Ramesseum that features. So this temple is in a bit of a ruined state, but a lot of it is still standing. It has a great colonnaded hall. It has some huge statues. There's a lot of scenes in there of Ramses worshipping the gods, but most importantly, there's a fantastic scene of Ramses' Battle of Kadesh, which was Ramses' masterpiece as far as his overseas campaigns went. And he carved the Battle of Kadesh on every available surface that he could. But this one is definitely one of the best preserved out of all those many carvings. Another hidden gem on Luxor's west bank is the mortuary temple of Ramses III, also called Medinet Habu. As you can see, this temple also retains a lot of its original colour. And this temple is really special because Ramses III was constantly under attack during his time, so that meant its construction is a little different. So here you can see that this temple is actually constructed the same way a fort would have been constructed. Now, Ramses III, he lived in the 20th dynasty, was constantly playing defense against a group of roving marauders known as Sea Peoples. Depictions of these mysterious people are shown on almost every surface of the temple. And you can tell that Ramses' life was absolutely consumed with fighting off these invaders. These people didn't actually just go after Egypt. They're almost certainly partially responsible for the collapse of every major civilization at this time. And it's to Ramses' credit that he managed to defeat them and protect Egypt from them, although Egypt, quite honestly, was never the same again after they left. Now, as your trip leader, I'm especially well placed to tell you about the Sea Peoples because I actually wrote my master's degree thesis on these people and their relationship to Egypt, and also about who these people actually were. So they weren't just one group of people. They were a group of several peoples who had banded together, and they all have ancient names like the Shardana and the Cheka. And we need to work out where each of these groups came from. And it's been hypothesized that some of these groups came from as far away as Italy or the southern coast of Turkey and even Crete. And my theory is that at this time there were huge civilizations. So there were the huge powers of Egypt and the Hittites and the Mycenaean Greeks, who were the aggressors in the Trojan War. And these big powers, just like today, really just went around screwing over all the little guys. And just like today, there are refugees. There are refugees from places like Troy and the ancient Minoans. And my theory is all of these displaced people, they got together and they swapped technology and they pooled all their resources and they formed an army, actually two armies, and went round and destroyed all the civilizations that were their aggressors. How's that for poetic justice? So the site of Medinet Habu especially is really a site not to be missed, especially me with your trip leader, because if you've got any questions about this place, or really any other place in Egypt, I can answer them. Our final stop on today's tour is the site of Dashur, which is not too far from Cairo. Now here you'll find more pyramids and deserted pyramids, which is what we all want. We don't want to share our pyramids with hordes and hordes of tourists. So we're going to have a look at 2 pyramids today. The first one is the Bent Pyramid. Now the Bent Pyramid was built by Pharaoh Sneferu, who was a bit of a pioneer in pyramid building. Now he was the father of Khufu, who built the Great Pyramid. So Sneferu actually built 2 pyramids, so this is the first one. And I think his architects realised about halfway through that it wasn't going to last at the incline that they were building it. So they changed the incline halfway up. This is a spectacular sight to see in the Egyptian desert, and best of all, there's never anyone around and you can just walk around it completely unhindered. Our last stop for today is the Red Pyramid, also built by Pharaoh Sneferu. And this is actually the world's first true pyramid, not the Great Pyramid of Giza, as most people tend to assume. The Red Pyramid, Egypt's first success story in pyramid building, sits alone in the desert, unvisited. Now, if you've ever had dreams of crawling down a pyramid shaft unhindered, all by yourself, like Indiana Jones, this is 100% the pyramid to visit. You can crawl down into the deserted burial chamber, explore it on your own, and feel like a real adventurer, which is what we all want. So join me on the Inverted Atlas Invaders, Traders and Pyramid Builders tour in December. It's going to be an unparalleled experience in the land of the pharaohs.